Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to AusBooks, and this is just where I talk about Australian books. And I realize we're just about 10 videos into this, and I haven't mentioned a single bit of fiction so far. I've mentioned it here and there, but in terms of like an actual video, we just haven't gotten to it yet until today, because I'm going to be talking about the first major, I think, English Australian poet. Again, we've had thousands and thousands and thousands of years of Indigenous poetry too, but I only have the knowledge to speak about English just because that's what I know. And that is the one and only Francis MacNamara, aka Frank the Poet. One of my favorites. This is me going to be gushing about him because I love his poetry. He had such an interesting life, and let's start talking about him. So he claims he was born in Castle, I think that's how you say it, in 1810. So he's Irish. While the records of him say that he was actually born in Wicklow. Again, when it comes to these convict writers, take everything with a grain of salt because a lot of the times they lied when it came to their personal information just to mess with the authorities and stuff like that. So again, it could be anything really, but we know facts about him really. He was worked in the mines. He was caught stealing cloth just casually, and also he was a part of the Ribbon Men, which were a secret society aimed to overthrow landlords pretty much to save their tenants who were farmers back in the day. And he was a part of that, which I kind of think contributed to maybe some decisions being made about his punishment because he was sent to Australia in the early 1830s, right? I think he was sent for 7 years, but again, it got extended a lot because he couldn't stay out of trouble. First, when Frank got here, he worked in Tamworth before it was named that. He worked as a shepherd, and according to him, he lived and slept in a box and kept the dingoes from eating the sheep while trying to keep the dingoes from eating him. But I think he really enjoyed it up there. It was peaceful and all that stuff. But then he was forced to move his position and work in the mines in Sydney, which I don't think he wanted to do at all compared to some of the poetry that we know from that time. Because especially in the summer, but just all around the year, the mines underground would get really hot, of course, and men would be forced to work naked, and within 5 years at most, you'd be dead from the air pollution. So he wasn't very much interested in doing that. After that, in probably 1839, Frank and a group of some other mates were tried to escape. They found some guns, which were back then super illegal for convicts to have because you could be instantly receive the death penalty or just killed right there on the spot. And so they had some guns and they got caught trying to escape with a ship. And Frank wasn't actually killed for that. He wasn't executed. Instead, he was sent to Van Diemen's Land, which is Tasmania, and that's kind of where what we have with Frank. The case kind of goes cold after that. There is a couple poems here and there that are attributed to him, but I don't really know about some of those just because they don't have the humor and the wit that his more famous poems do. And again, we don't know that much after that. I think some people say he died of hypothermia, but I don't think we have the records to prove that. That's pretty much his life. In the late 1800s, Banjo Patterson, who we're definitely going to get to later, found a box of poems that were signed off with Frank the Poet. But we don't have any evidence that was actually Frank himself. There was also a short collection of all collected poems of him. It was a short biography published in the 70s, I believe, by John Meredith and Rex Whalen, who were folklorists. But I cannot find a copy of that to save my life. It is like the only book that Frank's ever had. And if I ever saw that, you wouldn't hear it from me because I would have just passed away on the spot from just shock. And I can't tell you how much it would mean to me if I found that because I love Frank. You can tell by his poems, he was a very witty and sharp tongue, and which very much got into trouble a lot of the times because he would speak back to the officers in verse. And a lot of the times he'd say in his poems he was flogged 14 times for speaking back. He had that very Irish don't tell me what to do attitude, which I kind of love. And again, we'll see that later on with some other writers. But I thought, to give you an example of that, I would read some of Frank's poetry just because there isn't that many. And I've read this before on my channel. So if you don't want to hear me try his poetry, this way you can jump off. Just go read him. You can find him online. But he has a lot of fun poems. Again, I've read these on my channel before. He has one about a petition to change the cook who was cooking for the convicts because he was such a bad cook that even the gospel writers couldn't even stomach his food and say more please. They were like, yeah, no. Frank would rather have the local executioner cook food for them than this one man, which I love. And he names people too, which is really fun. But this is one of his more famous ones. Again, if you want to look for an edition of Frank to have, because again, he barely has anything, you can always go online and find his poems. But Les Murray done a small, slim, early English poets of Australia here. And this has Frank the Poet in it, the major works. It's barely that much. And yes, we will get to these other poets later. But this is probably the best book to have if you want to own Frank physically. But yeah, he doesn't even have an ebook yet. Hopefully someone will do that. But this is his poem, For the Company Underground, which is, I love. And again, we were talking about how he was sent to work in Sydney in the mines. And this is what he wrote about it. And it's, again, you'll see the rhymes. Australian poetry is all rhymes. If you don't like rhyming, it's probably not for you. But again, you can see how people read these and ran with it, but I better read it now because I'm rambling. So here it is, For the Company Underground. When Christ from heaven comes down straight away, all his Father's laws to expound, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When the man in the moon to Moreton Bay is sent in shackles bound, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When the Cape of Good Hope to Telford Bay comes for the change of £1, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When cows in lieu of milk yield tea and all lost treasures are found, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When the Australian co's heaviest dray is drawn 80 miles by a hound, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When a frog, a caterpillar and a flea shall travel the globe all around, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. And when turkey cocks on Jews' harps play and mountains dance at the sound, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When milestones go to church to pray and whales are put in the pound, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When Christmas falls on the 1st of May and O'Connell's King of England's crowned, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When thieves ever robbing on the highway for their sanctity are renowned, MacNamara shall work that day for the Company Underground. When the quick and the dead shall stand in array, sighted at the trumpet's sound, even then, damn me if I'd work a day for the Company Underground, nor above ground. I love that so much. That's one of his big ones. He also has, probably his most famous one, is A Convict's Tour of Hell, which is a double meaning because it's kind of like the Australian Inferno in a way. MacNamara goes pretty much to hell. He names people along the way who are real officers, other convicts, and talk about all the punishments they went through. It's very bleak, but the double meaning is that he's going to hell, but also when one of the first officers who wasn't on the first fleets actually traveled to Australia and witnessed the early colony, he literally said it looks like hell. So that's a double meaning there. But again, I'll read you a tiny line of it just to show you the type of rhyming he does. So he's asked to tell his name. So he goes, "Stranger, I say from whence art thou? And by your name, pray tell me now. Kind sir, I come from Sydney jail. My name I don't mean to conceal. And since you seem anxious to know it, on earth I was called Frank the Poet." Like that type of rhyming, I just devour it so much. Again, there's only a couple pages of him collected all together, but I think that gives you a good sense of the type of poet Frank was. I just love him so much. It's very bleak, it's very dark, But he has that humor to him, but I don't think really anyone ever captured again, when it comes to poetry or verse here in Australia. I think maybe like the real like darker stuff of Henry Lawson, but then he has like a humor of like Patterson or I don't know really. I need to think about that more. But no one's ever been able to walk that fine line as MacNamara did again. And I just manifest one day we'll get a new edition of him. Text Classics should absolutely get on it and just reprint it. Because he is one of the first major figures in writing in Australia when it comes to fiction. And he's just one of my favorite writers ever. And yeah, that's your AusBooks for today. Francis MacNamara. Go check him out. Go read him. See if he's for you. And yeah, have a blast and kind of laugh at the dark humor that he has. And yeah, thank you so much for watching BookTube. And I will see you next time.